Cinema's dying, there's no good films anymore, the cinemas basically all going to start closing. We've had the highest grossing films of all time come out in the last like 15, 20 years. If you think about Christopher Nolan at the top of his game of big budget summer blockbuster, Denis Villeneuve, he doesn't get enough credit, I think. The eyes are not on TV, kids aren't watching TV. I know it's hard to grow on YouTube when you put up a 90-minute video. A lot of people start podcasts and abandon them.
We decided from the beginning, it potentially was a catastrophic mistake. What is the best film you've ever seen and why?
I could watch it once a year, every year of my life, and I'll notice something different about it.
Worst film and why?
Dialogue was atrocious, and it's 2 hours and 45 minutes long. People have said, are you not bored of seeing a load of films? Sometimes I just cannot be.
This episode is sponsored by Vorbos. Check them out in the description below. But we can say it's good to have you here.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you
It's
so much
really
for
nice to
having
have
me.
you on.
Which is really cool. So for anyone that doesn't know, you are one of the co-hosts of the Pulp Kitchen podcast,
Yes.
which is a film podcast.
Yep.
We obviously know each other from school, which is like the three of us, which is why this is really cool.
And we had quite a few classes together. Like, I did most of my GCSEs with James.
I've got some good memories of that.
Yeah.
Biology with you.
Bottom set math is thriving.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then we had like English and drama A level.
drama, yeah.
Always good fun.
Drama A level. Yeah.
Drama A level was a joke.
It was-
the best.
actually cover? What does drama A level
You mean I could
actually
spend a
cover?
third of my time at school just like dicking around,
Okay.
Yeah.
pretending to like devise something.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
the best.
It was
I recommend
hilarious.
everyone does drama A level.
Yeah.
It's
Especially
an
if you're
easy
not,
A.
like,
Yeah,
super
yeah.
traditionally academically inclined.
Yeah,
It's definitely worth it.
It's
Just
a
for
bit
the
of
memories.
a DOS.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a DOS, which was super fun.
But genuinely, even though, yes, you're kind of learning, really important skills that I think to getting used to devising things and speaking in front of people.
Yeah, that's
is
yeah. I
probably a
can
skill I
understand
value
that.
most.
Yes.
Did it help build your confidence?
It's like, I don't think that directly does it, but removing barriers from an early age where you're constantly being asked to work with difficult people who have different ideas from you, to perform for a grade and to like communicate an idea effectively.
Yeah.
I don't think that comes up for people until they're like way into their 20s and all of a
That's
sudden
a
you're
good point.
delivering something and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I've never actually spoken in front of people before. Whereas I think like if you just are used to like performing and failing in front of people from an early age,
Yeah.
I think there's so much value in that.
Definitely.
How long have you been doing the podcast for?
Just did 2 years, so we just put out our 100th episode.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
We got there and
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like
we were saying when you got here, we were like, we just hit 1,000 subs, and then as a fellow podcast, you were like, first 1,000's the hardest. And you're like
It's
that,
brutal.
man. He's like that battle-worn warrior in the pub who's like scarred up, and then someone's like, you know nothing of battle.
It's true.
I remember
It's so
my
true.
first thousand.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
sucking a pipe in the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
No, it's really hard. Like the first 6 months for us, you're basically putting out podcasts to no one.
Yeah.
And you're, as podcast host, pretending that people are listening, which is
Yeah.
really hard because
Yes.
there's
You
really
have
anyone
to.
listening
You
yet.
have to put the face
And
on
I
it,
sort of
yeah.
said to George when we started, I was like, I think I'm ready to do this for at least 2 years and have no one listen.
That's
Are you
that
up
was
for
like
that?
really good that you had that in your head when you actually started.
Yeah,
a lot
it's
of people
like-
don't. They're like, I'm going to blow up in a month or 2 months or something.
That's what
Never
everyone
gonna happen.
everyone says, that you should do that. Everyone says you should go in assuming it's not going to get anywhere for the
Yeah.
first like
Yeah.
2 or 3 years. But I
Yeah.
think everyone secretly goes, yeah, but we could go viral.
Yeah,
And I think that's
definitely.
that little devil in your head.
And it's like, for some people it happens and it's
Yeah.
like amazing, go run with it. But for a lot of people, unless you're already famous or you already have a following, or you're like a top 20 comedian that's regularly on 8 out of 10 Cats or Mock the Week, congratulations, you can, or you're like Louis Theroux, it's like,
Yeah,
congratulations,
yeah.
here's your like top charting podcast. But for a lot of other people, you basically just like hope, pray,
Yeah.
probably have to do video, and you put, as you guys are doing, like
Yeah,
you put
yeah.
clips out and pray that one thing resonates with some people,
Yeah.
and then hopefully you just like incrementally turn over 1%
Yeah, yeah,
of them
yeah.
to the show. And yeah, it's like, I remember the day I put up one clip after
Yeah.
like 6 months of just like talking to the ether, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh my god, like 20,000 views on that.
Was that a
Really?
video short clip?
It's a short clip. Like we did
Right.
like George did a random impression of Louis Theroux that we were just like putting clips up, and I was almost like, I was barely trying to put clips up. I was like, yeah, I guess I'll put one up today. Like never got any views, and then I put one up at like 1 a.m. And then I woke up the next day and it had like 20,000 views, and by the end of the day it had like 100, which
Wow.
like considering we
Wow,
got 400
okay.
views like
Yeah.
for everything, I was
Right.
like, oh my god, like,
Yeah.
this is great. And then we got an audience, and then things just kept going.
So did you start doing the YouTube right from the start then?
Yeah, I always said we should do video for
Yeah.
the same reasons I said before. I think it's really hard to get someone to listen to your podcast if they don't know you. Whereas if there's video, I think that creates a lot more of an attachment to the people they're watching. Again, especially if they don't already know who you are.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier. There's no, as far as I'm aware, you can't organically discover audio podcasts right
So
now.
this is what I was going
Is
to
it
ask you
changing?
about. I don't think that it is, and I think this is part of the thing. We've talked about this until the cows come home, but the whole thing of like, I don't understand how audio only podcasts grow without an audience, like you said,
Yeah.
and B, even people with video, I don't understand how they get audio listeners. Our audio listenership has remained fairly consistent from the beginning.
Yeah.
Our listenership number has been fairly consistent.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how you can market it. And so whenever people say I'm getting like 10,000 plays a month or downloads a month or whatever, I always just go, how? Like with YouTube, I get it. I know that it's like, okay, make your thumbnails better, make your titles better, make the intro more dynamic, cut out the more dead space, whatever it is, more cuts, better color grading, whatever. And more shorts, for example, like you said, discoverable. I don't understand how people do it with audio. I
would have thought like the only way that you could do it is just by building your personal brand. If you look at someone like Shivani, for example, who we had on the other day, like she has a huge personal brand, and I think that is what really helped catapult her in her listenership for audio only. Because you can't put any video content out at all. So I think as long as you build your personal brand and then that funnels people through to your podcast, that's the only way that I could logically think of doing it.
Yeah, I think like so ours plays on the podcast apps that host video as well. So like Spotify, our video automatically starts playing on
I've
Spotify.
seen that.
So even if it's basically ready. If you do want to watch, great. But if you also just want to listen, it's there.
Yeah.
But I think having that, oh look, there they are on the screen or on your phone, is quite a good way to then get people into your audio. And then some people will just be like working or drawing, and they'll like, if something funny's happening or interesting, they might look at the video and like engage with it, and then they can just like switch out. And again, I think if you don't have a platform, it helps increase an audience's understanding of who they're listening to.
But when you were putting out at the beginning, how did you get an initial audio listener base? Or did you have
just
one?
Clips. I just think people would see clips on TikTok first, and then Instagram eventually came. We got numbers on Instagram afterwards. I think people we do like film reviews, and we do a bit of news, and we do just general chit chat, and then people send us emails, which makes up like half of the show. So we try to create like a nice listening experience for people, and then we have more audio than we do video currently. Or as in if you take out the Spotify video, so like outside of YouTube, we get more. I'd say it's about 65% audio for us at the moment.
And is that because in your link in bio for like Instagram, for example, you just have a link tree that has Spotify, Apple, and YouTube?
Yeah, so I think links to everything. I think Spotify, Apple, on YouTube, and then if you're on TikTok, it will link Instagram, and Instagram will link TikTok.
And so, but what's interesting is we decided from the beginning that in our link in bio, we were only going to have YouTube, which could have potentially was a catastrophic mistake. But we were like, we want to focus on growing YouTube more than anything else, so we're just going to double down on YouTube, and we would only have the link to our channel on
Especially
YouTube.
when you spend hours making a video. You're like, watch my damn video.
Please.
And to Barney.
Like,
exactly.
It's like, please, I spend lots of time,
literally,
money on this. But,
how did you come up with the idea for the podcast?
I wanted to do it for a long time. So me and George actually tried to do it like 7 years ago.
How did you meet George, by the way?
Went to uni with George.
Okay.
So we went to uni together. I studied I actually dropped out of uni, which is an interesting story. So I studied psychology at uni, which like I came out of school really interested in learning stuff, but none of my subjects I was like, I'm gonna study that. And so I was very much like, I'll do psychology. And then while I was at uni, I was like, I probably just want to move on to work, but I was like ready to go. Anyway, met George. All the best stuff I did at uni was like doing plays, directing plays, producing plays, essentially doing loads of media stuff. So while I was at uni, I was like, I should probably like work in media because that's all the stuff I'm enjoying doing. Met George when we were on a play, and we just like, with a load of other castmates, we were just constantly talking about films. Like it was that time when the Force Awakens trailer had come out, and there was this like renewed, previously dormant excitement for like Star Wars stuff, and everyone who'd grown up with Star Wars was like connecting, and there was this powerful excitement. And so we just became really close friends. And then about 2 years after uni, I'd always listened to podcasts and thought there's probably only one thing I could talk about consistently every week, because otherwise I'm just not that smart, and it's probably like films and TV shows. And then George is also, I'm so lucky because he's not only is he a friend of mine, but he's like my smartest friend, and he has a weirdly encyclopedic knowledge of films, and I can literally throw anything at him. And he can, if he hasn't seen, he probably has seen it, but if he hasn't seen it, he can tell you something about that film. So like, as someone to do a film podcast with, that's really useful. We tried to do it a long time ago, and at the time I was working in TV, and George was working for a company that basically told him that you can't. It was sort of like a film PR company, and they were like, you can't put in like opinions about what you think about films on the internet.
Interesting.
So we also weren't really doing it properly. We were trying to do it over FaceTime. We did a couple of trials, and it never really felt like a complete idea. And we were also just like a lot younger. And I don't think, now we look at it, we just weren't really ready to do it. So that kind of like died for ages. COVID happened, and I was like, I still think the idea is good. I came out of COVID like panicking like a lot of freelance creatives being like, I love the work I do and it's great and it's dynamic, it's interesting, but I feel like you've got to have something else that you can grow that's mine. So at the moment I do like commercial branded content and I get paid to work on like other people's shoots for other briefs and other brands, and I love it and it's great and it never feels like a job, but I'm very much like the video I make for them could get 10 views or 10 million, but my rate's the same. And don't get me wrong, like it's fine, but I thought if I can build something and put the same amount of hours and attention into it, if it keeps going and I can keep building it, that audience and that product as a podcast is as valuable as I can grow it. So I could monetize it infinitely technically if it gets the views. So I was like, I should really try and do that, set up a business. Went back to George and was like, do you still want to do it? We could do it differently. I now want to do it as video. I already have this camera equipment and all of this stuff. And like, as you guys probably know, like production expertise and equipment is a massive barrier to entry for so many people getting into podcasts. And so I was like, I basically already have that absorbed, so why don't we just go for it again? And then we spent like a couple of months, this was the summer of 2021, we spent a couple of months just like deciding what the show would be. We originally thought it would be like a food and film podcast, which very quickly died because we just know nothing about food. I think that came out of this thought that, oh my god, there's so many other film podcasts out there, you kind of have to be distinct. But what I realized is that actually not many people are doing it. I thought when we started there'd be so many, let's be honest, like 2 white middle class guys talking about films in a podcast.
I didn't want to say it.
I'm glad you did.
And we were so aware of it. We didn't want to basically be those sensationalist film bros on the internet, like really reducing films down to like, I don't know, this very, say the most outrageous thing to get the most clicks. And like what you realize is that like a lot of people start podcasts and abandon them, and there actually weren't that many people self-producing video talking about films in a way that's a little bit more like, we're inspired by sort of like traditional radio broadcasting style of reviews. There actually aren't that many people doing it. And when we like eventually got into the top 50 chart for our category, you look around to see like who's doing exactly what we're doing and who are our competition. I remember like, you know, there's maybe like 2 or 3 other podcasts doing it, and sometimes we're above them and sometimes we're below them. Like the rest of the podcasts in that category, it's like the Love Island after show, and it's like, great, not what we're trying to do. Or it's like the Succession post episode analysis, like the official HBO one. I'm like, amazing, also not what we're trying to do. As far as like 2 people self-producing a podcast, it's like, oh, it's actually you just need to keep consistently doing a thing, and you can actually be one of the people up there. So that was basically it. We just kept going and doing it for 2 years.
I think one of the things that immediately stands out to me about the difference between, because I always find it interesting having different podcast hosts on this show, because every experience is different and every podcast is different in a way. What's interesting is the fact that you guys don't do guests.
We have done one.
You've done one.
We've done one.
But your format is you and George.
Yeah.
Our format is guest based, which
is hard. I think it's easier and harder, but I see your point.
What I'm curious about is whether you considered having guests as part of the format at any point, and also what you think is easier and harder about that. Because obviously one of the things, I mean, we had I don't know when this was, maybe like 3 months ago, 2-3 months ago, there was a month where everything was going really well, and we had 4 guests. That he knows what I'm going to say. We had 4 guests booked in the diary, and we were like, "Oh, that's great."
It was like 5 or 6, but
was it? I think it was 5. We had 5 guests in the diary, and they were all confirmed for like different shooting dates. I think there were 2 or 3 in one week, and then one of whatever. But we were like, "Okay, great. We've got 5 weeks of content," because when it's guest based, you have to constantly be forecasting ahead. We actually had the idea for the podcast in August. And from August, we only launched in January of this year, in 23, but we had the idea in August 22, and we were like, let's film 10 episodes so that when we launch in January, we have like a 2.5 month runway, because we don't want to get to the point where we don't have a guest. And about 2 months ago, we had a point where we had 5 guests in the diary.
They were big names.
Some of them were big names, big names, and within
they're not on. You could be like the biggest names.
The biggest A-listers.
We had the biggest names.
Nobody had bigger names than we had. It was going to be huge. We had 5, and within a week, they all cancelled for one reason or another. Someone was sick. Someone was like, whether that was legit or not, we don't know. You know, half of it's probably like they looked at our sub count and was like, not worth it. Let's just bin it off. Why am I doing that? But 5 weeks worth of content that we had a safety net around, just up in smoke in a day or a week. And that is obviously something that's the beauty of doing it when it's just with you and someone else. It's like you just turn up each week or however often you do it, and you just do it. So what do you think about that kind of parallel?
So they're completely different propositions for like trying to produce a show. I think like out the bat, George and I would love to do more guests. We would love to have guests all the time. I'd love to have access to talent. people who are doing cool stuff in film, writers, directors, basically anyone. The thing that we realised is that we had a guy called Phil Dunster who's on Ted Lasso on our show, which was really cool, and the numbers for YouTube for that were the best we ever had. And it was really interesting to get to speak to him. We shot it like 2 months before it came out, and we timed it to come out with the release of season 3 of Ted Lasso, so we sort of like really nicely intersected there. What we realised when we sit down to do a show with a guest is that it's a completely different show. It's a completely different headspace for me and George, who are used to basically like being as fast as we can with our own dynamic, and our show's very much, it has this set structure which happens every single week, and all we have to do is fill in the slots. So we chit chat for 5 minutes, then one of us has probably seen something and the other's probably seen another, so like he'll talk about what he's seen, I'll talk about what I've seen. Great, those are the title and thumbnail. We're very lucky, we get emails sent every week, and then we do about 20 minutes of people asking us questions or following up on something that we said with a question. Great, free ideas for content, and then we play a game at the end.
And you can also be yourself throughout that entire process as well.
Exactly, I completely be myself. I get to just live react. I've got like my own thoughts which I've processed. I do a little bit of prep, but basically it kind of writes itself. The problem with the interview is that, you know, as you guys will know, to do it well requires prep. You also have to be considerate of people's time. The thing about marketing cycles for films, TV shows, is that you get very different amounts of time for different calibers of stars. Like we could do a junket style thing where you get, you know, when you're in the hotel and there's like the poster of the thing, and you have 5 minutes and they give you the content, and that's amazing, but that's not a whole podcast. It could be a supplement to a show. So I'm like, do we want to have that to supplement the show? But what we'd love to do is have an interview show. But as you guys know, I have to now organize other people's time. As well as mine and George's. George works full time for a job. I like work freelance and do like multiple different things. My diary's like super random and inflexible. So I'd love to do it, but at the moment we're so full on doing our show that I don't want to basically like compromise that. It's like if we get access to talent, I'd constantly like I'd drop everything, and me and George would try and make it work, and we go and see someone. But it's hard to like actively pursue it when you're doing the podcast. But for all those reasons, like I have to plan who's going to do it, and like we have to research it. I want to do it properly.
But do you not think the upsides outweigh the downsides in terms of actually building a network and help?
Totally, you get access to their audience, or people who like, you know, Star Wars, and I get someone from Star Wars. You get their audience. Like, totally, I see all the benefits. It's a different kind of show we'd have to come up with. We need to find our voice as interviewers. Maybe we don't both of us try and interview someone. Maybe it's one person who does it. Like, it's the good thing about there being two of us is that we don't both have to be available to do it. So yeah, if I had access to talent and I was pushing it, I'd 100% do like a separate interview show.
So out of interest, going back to what you were saying before about clips, when you launched, you said it took 6 months for that clip that popped that ended up getting 100,000 views.
About 6 months, yeah.
So for those 6 months, were you putting out shorts on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts, and how frequently were you doing it, and did you have any kind of specific marketing strategy around it?
Yes, less so, and my clips were crap. At the beginning, which is fine.
Eventually
you just learn, and like, just very slowly through making loads of mistakes, you get, like, that does better. Fill the whole screen of the phone for the first half. What did I learn about clips specifically? Or
was there any particular thing that you realized, like, so in the beginning for the first 6 months, how often would you say you were putting out clips?
Not enough. I'd say I was lucky to put 2 or 3 out a week, whereas now I think we aim for daily, but that's assuming we've got the time and the content. You realize that it's basically in the first 3 seconds, you've got to hook someone with a statement, a question, or like a proposal. So for us, like, loads of our games do really well. So all the games we play at the end of the show, which is like fun pub quiz style trivia, all of that is basically creating a statement. So like, can you name 7 movies in 30 seconds that have the word day in the title? Okay. And then so very quickly, like, the person is now also thinking. And it's someone said to me the other day, like, it's not that they're playing along, but it's kind of like watching The Weakest Link. You're like seeing, you sort of play along, but if they get it faster than you, it's kind of okay, because you're sort of watching them kind of figure it out.
It's like a really good way to engage your audience, actually.
It's fantastic.
I've never thought everyone, even people who aren't film buffs, everyone has.
I would still be thinking about that. If I was watching it, I'd still be thinking in my head.
Yeah, and the key is not to be like uber, like, name 10 Fellini movies. It's like, okay, great. But instead, you just like do really random one. Like, I did one the other day, which I've created a game called Shrek 1, Shrek 2, or Shrek 3. And I named all the fantasy characters, and you have to tell me if they debuted in Shrek 1, Shrek 2, or Shrek 3.
Right.
It's like super mainstream, Shrek. Everyone would give that a go. Like, was that Shrek 2 or Shrek 3? So like, just like random stuff.
That's cool.
I'm curious about the dynamic when it comes to spoilers. I'm the most spoiler prone person. I hate spoilers. To the point where when people ask me what I'm watching, I won't tell them in the event that they say anything that could give it away.
You've been burnt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my girl's terrible for spoilers. Awful.
Just let it out.
She'll just say she'll say some stuff like, "Oh my god, baby, you have to watch the movie. It's really, really great." And I'll be like, "Oh, what's that?" And I don't give anything away. Yeah, it's like an alien movie. Like I won't say it, but it's like, you know, he basically has to save the world from aliens, and then in the end, the alien is him. And I'm like, that's you just ruined it. And then I don't know. Honestly, it's still a great movie. It's like just it kills me. With what you do, spoilers is obviously a really big part of it because you have to discuss movies. And as you said, every episode there'll be something maybe George has seen that you haven't, and vice versa. Isn't there a part of you that's like, well, I don't want him to talk about this movie because I might have wanted to watch it and appreciate it?
So numbered episodes always spoiler free.
Yeah.
Like to an extent where like Darth Vader is Luke's father, but like, there's like things that are a given. But like basically you can, if we review something like kind of similar to how a radio broadcaster would do it, you don't reveal the plot. Yeah. But when there are films of interest, or like we get demand from people who want to know something, or me and George are really interested to discuss the film and its plot in detail, we put out bonus episodes that are spoiler casts. So people who have seen it and who are interested. And we also do find that like, you know, the Batman will come out and you want to tell people if it's good or not, and you can do that without spoiling it. But then a film like the Batman will have so much demand because everyone wants to talk about like the ending and what this means for the sequel. And so there's loads of reasons for you to go, okay, a week down the line we're going to do this spoiler cast, and you can refer to it the week after because people are going to start seeing Batman. Okay. Like, guys, we did a spoiler cast. If you want to go and check it out. But yeah, I think always our numbered episodes, spoiler free. Everyone can come and get recommendations without ruining what we're talking about. So that's quite a good rule that we have.
That's really cool.
Yeah. At what point did you start monetizing the podcast, and what were the conversations surrounding the kind of avenues that you were looking at?
So we monetized it through like standard YouTube automatic monetizing,
like AdSense.
So just like AdSense, and then
how long did that take out of interest to get to your first K?
Oh. Do you know what? I can't remember when it happened, but like not that long ago.
Really? Okay,
when did we monetize it? Would have been maybe a year ago.
Because you're at what, like 2.5 now or something?
Yeah, on YouTube we're like 2,500.
Because for people at home, you need to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time.
Yes.
Or I think it's like 10 million shorts views. I think.
Oh, they've done that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like the YouTube AdSense is kind of like, it's very low. You get a little bit of money, but it's really low input from me. So like I flicker, as you know, like I flick a box when I upload, and it's like cool, like some automatic money. And then we host on Spotify, and Spotify has its own basically similar AdSense program. So they basically sell your audience to advertisers, and it's like different from the month depending on like how much ad spend there is. So towards Christmas there's like a little bit more because all the brands are spending money, and they basically will automatically put ads in your podcast, but again very passive, so I don't input that. That happens automatically. And then if we get approached by brands to do brand deals, that's where we get the vast amount of our advertising revenue, because that implies like an ad read from us. So the brand is hearing us essentially recommend something, so our price is a lot higher for that, and it's like a direct to our audience ad read. It's not like someone from Samsung is reading an ad about the new phone. It's like, I'm now reading to you from the brand who approached me. So when did we monetize it? I think as soon as we could, we started letting money come into it. And then whenever we've had an opportunity to do an ad read with a brand, we've usually gone for it, unless it's something that it just doesn't really appeal to us, but usually we've gone for it.
When it comes to brand stuff, one of the things that we have always kind of gone back and forth around is pricing, because I think it's really difficult to accurately price yourself, because on the one hand you don't want to feel like you're being extortionate, but on the other hand you don't want to feel like you're getting swindled for your audience. How did you figure out how to price yourself when it came to brand deals?
I asked a lot of people, so I tried to figure out, I asked some people who, for agencies or for brands, pay for influencers to market. I'm like, okay, so you paid this influencer with this many impressions in a month with that following, how much for how many things? And like, the problem with advertising on podcasts is there's such a variety. So if you want like a 90-second ad read, that's one thing. But if it's going to be broken out as a clip on my TikTok where I have more followers, that's almost like its own entity. Do you want me to do a day of filming like in your brand space? That's like a day of my time and a day of George's time, and I'm going to edit that, which is time. So you sort of get used to knowing what a day of your time is worth, and then what the value of, like, whereas really a 90-second ad read takes me 90 seconds to record, so it's very time rich for me. But you're now getting access to my audience and I'm talking directly to them, so there is no, I think, like automatic value of it, because the value of what your audience is worth is as much as your audience is. But I would say, like, try and think about, if someone's asking you to go somewhere for a day and film something as part of like a branding exercise, think about what a day of your time is worth, and then go for that. And as a freelancer who does video content, I have quite a good idea of what, like, I have a literal day rate, so I'm like, okay, like around about that would work. Right.
And are you approaching brands, or are they approaching you? Like, how are you managing That's
a mixture. We've had a good mix of brands that have approached us. So like lots of cinema brands have approached us, which is really cool. We currently have a deal with View Cinemas, so a 6-month exclusive with View, which has done really well, and that's got like 3 rounds of advertising within that. And then
what does that mean? 3 rounds of advertising within that?
Basically, got like three different rounds of ad activation within that. So
Okay.
like they obviously said we want to market with you for 6 months.
Yeah.
Can you not advertise another cinema for 6 months? So there's an exclusivity with that, which is very fair enough. And then they've done like they did a Halloween one, they did one for the Barbenheimer week, and yeah, they'll just like.
But as in, is that you doing an ad read for each episode that you've got during that 6 month exclusivity?
Just one round. So we've done social media stuff for them. We did an ad read each time, and then we did a day filming at a View Cinema.
Okay.
So that like day filming is like costed into that.
So for those 6 months, every episode you'll be like, this is brought to you by View
No.
Cinema.
Just like they'll have one round.
Which is one episode.
Yeah, one episode or one like round of posts on social media and a story, and then they'll do another one, and then they can do another one.
So for 6 months, that's just 3 rounds. Three
the 6
posts.
months is just exclusivity. So I just basically can't advertise another cinema show.
But that just includes 3 pieces of content.
Yeah.
In
Basically
some
like
form
3
or
rounds of
another.
ads.
interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I imagine for them, they would have gone, okay, marketing team, we've got our budget for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
We want to market to UK-based cinema influencers who are going to recommend people to go to cinema. And they probably just go, okay, there's these podcasts or these influencers, and they would allocate budget.
Yeah.
That's how I imagine it goes.
Right.
I'm with you. Okay.
That's what I found is a little bit frustrating about me cold emailing brands, because outside of an agency, I don't know when that brand has allocated all of their marketing spend for the year. So you might cold email a brand, and they might be like, hey, this sounds great, but like we've just set the next 4 months and that we've like allocated our budget, and I don't know when they're next having the meeting to allocate the budget. So what I'm trying to do now is like get in with a couple of agencies who are the agencies that get approached by brands who will be like, hi, I am Apple. I want all of these influencers with this audience, with this demographic of this age. Can you find them for me? And then the agency basically puts you in touch. So
but don't they take quite a hefty fee though?
Probably.
For that
But
kind of brokerage.
Yeah.
there's only so much time I can put into reaching out. So it's a tricky one. And like the cold emailing is, you should do, I'm always trying to do as much of it as I can.
Yeah.
But sometimes the ROI on my time emailing is less valuable than trying to find people who are better at like understanding those dynamics already, or people with pre-existing contacts. Basically be like, I know exactly who to put you in touch with for this kind of ad thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So
that's another benefit of having guests coming on though, because then they can, like, you know, you can tap into their network and they can introduce you to people, and you can eliminate that middleman of a broker as well.
Yeah, totally.
Going back to the content side of things, I saw a really interesting video recently breaking down the idea that some YouTubers are leaning more into a kind of talk show format, in the sense that talk shows have segments, and James Corden is someone who's, for whatever you want to say about James Corden, has done this really, really well, where he's done, you know, Spill Your Guts and Fill Your Guts and Carpool Karaoke and stuff like that.
He doesn't get enough credit, I think, for Late Late Show.
Go on.
Well, he has a terrible...
terrible reputation.
Terrible reputation.
Hated.
And like even I think when he was just gone out to Late Late Show. I used to work in TV like, as a runner and like researcher on editorial side, and like you would just hear like pretty bad stories.
I've heard some. I'm not even in TV, and I've heard some
like
bad
stuff
stories.
where you behaved on League of Their Own, and like again, I'm not. This isn't new information. This is just like stuff that's very much out there. But despite that, and despite the palette of his presenter style not really vibing with like the English palette, what he did in America and how
you have to
took
respect
that format, and I think totally shook up late night and really went like clips and internet, YouTube first, is pretty impressive. And I think 100%. He left a lot of the legacy late night show hosts in the dust with what he did. And despite a lot of the clips, I'm like, oh my God, James, can you just be less fake and less like he smashed it. And he literally got like every famous person on his show doing stuff that you would have never seen them do on TV, and being really normal and natural, which is kind of what you always want to see from celebrities in content. I think that's what all TV show hosts are trying to do. They're trying to get a celebrity to be normal
and relax
and be like, oh, I'm like them.
It's so true.
And he does that really, really well.
So to that point, I was watching this guy who was basically breaking down the comparison between late night shows and YouTube channels, and how James Corden was the one who most effectively created different segments and kind of made it more of a variety show. And apparently he was actually quite vocal about the fact that he didn't want to do a talk show. He wanted to do a variety show, and he wanted to try all these different segments. And he said that there were segments that he tried that you would never have heard of because you did them like once or twice. It didn't really pick up. So everyone sees carpool karaoke and spill your guts or fill your guts, but they don't see, what was it like, whose nose is this or something? It was like something like where they show people celebrities' noses and whatever. It was like some random thing. It never took off.
Weird.
It's a huge hit. But again, you have to try different ideas, which is very much a YouTuber-esque format, which is I'm going to try, you look at someone like Mr. Beast who did like, I'm going to count to 100,000 for X amount of time.
Say Logan Paul like a million times.
Logan Paul a million times, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to fill my backyard pool with Orbeez and then do that, and then it's so yes, so finding different formats essentially. And so my question to you is, how much level of, I guess, ideation and iteration has there been with regards to segments on the show, or is it just, this is the general premise, we're going to loosely tinker with it but keep this format and just try and build off that?
It's constant, never ending. We talk about it constantly,
right?
How the show works. We're very much settled in our format now, but it takes a really long time to be like, this is the tone, this is what, like, this is how we want to fill the show. But like, we always talk about what is best for the show and how to evolve it. And I think a lot of people who want to start podcasts are I think everyone wants to start a podcast. A lot of people want to start a podcast, but I think they actually focus too much on like what they're going to do and the content. And I always tell people, like, it's better to just start and figure these things out as you go. Find a way. Like, I feel like a lot of people can go and make 6 episodes of a show, but it's how, like, can you do 60?
Yeah.
I always like find the easiest way to do as many podcasts as you can. And because you're smart and interested and you want to do your podcast, you will naturally pivot and shift your show to fit into something that works. Whereas I think everyone agonizes over episode 1. Like, what are we going to say?
True.
And everyone spends ages being like, what's our thing? What are we going to talk about? And like with us, I was lucky, like we were going to talk about films. But like there's a lot of things to do with that. Like, are you going to do news and rumors? Are you going to do breaking down different scenes of films? Or do you want to talk about the new stuff and review it? So you get a really good, like we had food in the first 12 episodes because like we just wanted to be different. But like, I really do think if you're interested in your own podcast and you just manage to do it consistently, all of that kind of takes care of itself. So a lot of people, I'm like, just don't focus on episode 1, focus on the next 20, 30, 40.
It's a really good piece of advice, because I feel like people do just focus on that one episode and they procrastinate, and then they just never end up really doing it.
And you guys will have done episodes and you go, oh, like that didn't work, or like let's lean into that side of it.
Yeah, we've constantly reiterated throughout
let's
the
ask those types of questions, because you care and you're doing it constantly, you'll naturally pivot and make it better. Versus if you just don't make anything, you're never learning and you're never moving
How
forward.
did you quantify what was working and what wasn't?
I think it was about feeling. I think so. I edit the show, and I'll sort of see what I think. I have a good sense of what makes for like good quality conversation that provides value. So sometimes we'll have a conversation and we'll go, like, was that really interesting to someone who doesn't know us or who's listening for the first time? And is that take on that film original and new? So I'm always thinking, like, does this provide value? Is it something that just does it provide value? And if it doesn't, or we have a conversation that just doesn't really drive that well, we might cut it. But now we're quite good to sort of, but very little gets cut from the show now.
Given the fact that podcasting is something that people do, or at least start because of enjoyment and something they're curious about or interested in. Obviously there are people that start it because they think, let's just sit down with people because it's a great way to make money, which lol. But obviously people do it because they're interested in it. However, as I'm sure you know, when you do something creative, especially when you're looking to make it full time, and there's a degree of seriousness that you have to apply to it, and you have to take it seriously enough to make it grow, and that can sometimes take the joy out of it. And I've seen that in many different disciplines, whether it's music or comedy or anything else. When you have to take something seriously, not all the time is it going to be, oh my god, this is my hobby and my favorite fun thing to do. There are times where there's an episode where maybe it's not your favorite episode, maybe the edit's a real pain to get through, maybe the questions, whatever. How do you reconcile with the fact that this is something that you are passionate about? Because sometimes it can also mean that you're passionate about it and that's maybe your outlet. So before, films were your outlet from your freelance work, for example. Now it's your job to talk about films to some extent because you're getting paid for it. How do you reconcile that?
So people have said, are you not bored of seeing a load of films? And a lot of the, like, sometimes, like, so I go to the cinema maybe twice a week, sometimes 3 times. It's really busy and we might have like a screening. So like sometimes I'm going to see The Flash. And don't get me wrong, I actually thought it was actually all right. But like sometimes I'm like, I really just don't want to see The Flash this week. But of all the things you could have told me 20 years ago that you'd have to do for a job.
I was going to say, it's really, dude. You're not doing bad, man.
Cinema,
like,
it's all right. Like, I'll take it. And like, all in all, I like going to, I functionally have to go to the cinema alone because like, I don't want to organise always like my
Yeah,
partner or my
yeah,
friends to go
yeah.
and see the cinema. It's also just a really nice thing to do.
Yeah.
It's quite a nice just like me time to go and see a film. And again, like of all the things I'd have to do for a job, going to the cinema is great. In terms of like editing the podcast and doing it every week, some weeks I'm like, great, done, do the podcast in my day, and it's like, love the episode, love the energy, great.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just cannot be fucked, and
Yeah.
like I work freelance and my schedule's like super different, and my day job is like editing and shooting.
Yeah.
So now like my side hustle is editing and shooting,
Yeah.
and I'm usually doing it in the mornings or in the evenings. So sometimes I'm like, yeah, great, I don't mind staying up till like 1, 2 in the morning to get this done and exported. Sometimes I'm so tired, and now I've got to make a thumbnail of George's face next to this film, and I'm just like. Yeah, it's fine. It's hard.
Constantly remind yourself that you get paid to watch a movie. Like, you constantly remind yourself.
But then I'm like, it's hard, but like, there's an audience and they want to see the next episode,
Yeah.
and this is what hard feels like. And if it was hard, other people would be doing it, and it works.
Yeah,
I try and
yeah.
like talk myself off the
Yeah,
the
it's a good way of
ledge.
thinking about
Yeah.
it. How do you engage with your audience? I'm curious to know that, because I saw you did for your 100th episode, you did a pub quiz, I think, which
Yeah.
you had a really good turnout for.
Oh, it was
from the
great,
looks of
yeah.
it. So like, how do you engage? Yeah, how do you engage your audience?
So we say our email address in our podcast like 5 times an episode.
Okay.
So every time we talk about a film, we're like, guys, let us know if you want to send us send your thoughts. Send them to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. And we get, ever since we started putting the email address out, we've had emails every single week, and sometimes like
Okay.
more than we could read out. So people send in emails. We actively read the emails on the show, and people will like respond to what we've said and send in their thoughts. So that provides a really good platform for people who love film, who are smart, who want to like get into like deep questions about cinema, to have this great conversation with the show. And that's like whole part of the podcast. And then we did our first ever live show. We were coming up to 100, and we were like, this is really cool, we should do something. Originally we were going to try and devise a live show, but we were just way too busy, and we realized it's devising a live show and you need to get a venue, and we'd want to not just, I don't know, we didn't want to just invite people into a very stale room and do a podcast. We'd want to make it an event. We'd said, let's focus on something else. We're known for our trivia and our games. Let's hire out a pub and sell 100 tickets to like a 100th episode pub quiz. And then we put it on sale, and it sold out in like less than 16 hours, which was
Wow.
That's
that
crazy.
was really cool, which is great. And then we were just like, okay, we should do it again, we should do it bigger. So we'd love to do another one. We'd love to actually now produce a live show and try and get people in to do something really cool and create that sense of community. And
That's
like
awesome.
it's a really typical cliche thing for like influencers to say or YouTubers to say, but you'll see like numbers on your screen. You'll be like, oh, like this many thousands of people like listen to the show, but it doesn't really mean anything. And then you meet an actual person, and you're like, oh my god, like that's an actual person who listened to your show, and even though it's just 100 people in that room, that was amazing. And then you make a social media splash about it.
Yeah,
So
of
we
course.
did an event. It was an actual real life thing. That thing I do on the internet. Look, real people. Look at these real normal people who came, and then you like let people feel really attached to that. People are like, why aren't you coming to France?
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm sorry, I'm not
Next
going.
year. Okay.
Yeah.
The budget's not that big.
Yeah.
But give me time.
I'm really curious about obviously the type of content that you do is very. I love the way you edit the footage. It's really it's got like a really particular feel to it. Like the color grading is very specific. The music choices, it's very tasteful, I think is the word I would use.
Thank you very much.
My question is, in an age where I actually just sent Barney, our producer, a video about this on the train here, about how the way YouTube is going comparative to TV, but also the way it's going comparative to the type of content formats people are using, because they're trying to retain attention, which is obviously the main thing. In an age where content is more and more about attention retention and view retention, and hooks and things like that, how does someone who makes the kind of content that you make reconcile with that fact? Because obviously before, even when we talked about shorts, you mentioned how there is somewhat of a formula. You said you need to have a hook or a question or initiate a game. How do you kind of straddle that line between playing the game, because obviously you want to grow, you want to be able to make a living off it and hopefully go full time, I assume, but then also sticking to the, I suppose, editing and creative style that you have?
So for YouTube specifically, it's quite a weird place to put yourself, because our podcasts are anywhere from like an hour to an hour and a half. And frankly, not a lot of people on YouTube are necessarily going to watch a 90-minute video. They're not going on YouTube to watch something for 90 minutes, but as we all know, it's really important to have that there. It's the primary video streaming software. So it's always got to be there, and there is an audience there, but it's more of like an optics thing in a lot of way. So like YouTube in the beginning, as we all know, it was like super lo-fi. It was cat videos, Numa, and just like very lo-fi. It was like the raw subconscious of the internet from 2004. Then all of a sudden brands get involved. All of a sudden late night TV clips are like the biggest thing on there. And you see the biggest YouTubers having bigger budgets than most TV shows now. So for us on YouTube, obviously, like I work in media, so obviously I have the equipment and I like to think the know-how to make something look good.
Yeah.
I always think it's, if I can, to the point where the ROI and the amount of time spent editing something is good enough to make me look like a better, more premium offering than what my peers are doing. So I always was like, I want it to be super sharp, super well lit video with great sound, so that a brand can look at that and be like, I want to attribute my brand to these people. Whereas something that's quite lo-fi or something that's not brand friendly isn't necessarily in that pool of people that they'd want to draw from. So making the YouTube look and feel a certain way is more of like an optics thing for us.
And that was from day one.
Yeah, I know it's hard to grow on YouTube when you put up a 90-minute video.
Yeah.
Because if someone only listens for 15 minutes, which is amazing for your 11-minute video, but for 90 minutes, it's like you sort of got to let something go and be like, I'm building a longer term thing here, trying to build an audience versus just like, this is, I did this on this building and threw it off, and it's a 7-minute video, amazing. It's like, well, I can't compete with that because we're not trying to do the same things. Instead, believe in the long form. Podcasting is big on YouTube too. I think I'm probably like, there are really big YouTube podcasts, like
definitely.
Impulsive is huge, and all of like the
Diary of the CEO and Rogan.
Yeah, like those are all huge, and all like the Vlog Squad stuff, they're all podcasters now. So it's not dead, but when you're trying to grow on that space, I think it's hard. You just go for what you can do, make it look as sharp as you want. Imagine someone who listens to your show in the marketing meeting trying to pitch you. You want it to look as good as possible. You want as many different brands to be like, yeah, their stuff looks smart. I wouldn't mind those guys putting our logo up on their podcast. It looks nice.
As someone who works in TV and media, but also is part of the digital creator economy and is building their own digital brand, which obviously YouTube, is kind of the future, I suppose. Yeah. I guess I'm curious how you see the future of the creative visual landscape evolving, because you've got one foot in both in each camp.
Sure. Big question. Look, I used to work in TV. TV's just, I don't know if you saw recently, they had like their first blackouts recently. It's in real trouble where they just didn't have shows on TV. So nothing.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, okay. Like, so loads of my friends in TV, are like struggling to find work. It's basically like 5 or 6 shows on TV right now. So you've got in the UK, so you've got like Strictly, I'm Celeb, Apprentice, One Show, and if you're part of those like staple TV shows that have been going on for years, you're fine. But it's really expensive to commission the first series of a TV show because you have to pay for the development costs. Right. So over months and years, you've had a team of people developing a format. That costs money. And just frankly speaking, the eyes are not on TV. Kids aren't watching TV, so that ad revenue of TV is lower. All of that is now being allocated to YouTubers and influencers because that's where the eyes are. So TV literally has less of a budget, and they've become all the commissioners are incredibly risk averse. So that's the situation that TV's in right now. Everyone's been saying TV's been dying for years, but it's becoming more and more evident as they're just not commissioning new stuff. So
I can see why, because I can't even remember the last time I watched something on TV. That's personally.
And people who are 10 years younger than us don't even have the instinct to flick something on like we might have had. I don't really watch. I watch sports and like the rare occasional show that someone's really pushed me to watch. But I'm not tuning in to watch it at a specific time.
Yeah, but exactly. And also, even if you take stuff like, kind of pillar shows like I'm a Celeb, for example, which I'm training at the moment, I wouldn't watch that. I don't want to watch that anyway. Yeah. But even if I did, I would watch the highlights on YouTube.
Yeah. And also you've got your own YouTube. You've got your own YouTube account with all the a la carte tailored content exactly that you want, and it's recommending new stuff for you because it knows you really well. So I don't really know what the future is. I feel like TV has to adapt or it will die. I feel like it will just become much more consolidated. Like radio didn't die. It's just this very particular thing that people put on in a very specific time, like automatic music. Sometimes I don't want to choose my music. I just want to hear someone to like not feel lonely in my flat, right? Thanks, Greg.
That was so hauntingly beautiful.
Yeah, is that all radio is now? Yeah. But like you have access to like all the music ever made. So why would you ask? As soon as you hear a song on Radio 1 that you don't like anymore, you're like, fuck this, I don't want it.
I'm not forced to listen to
the
it.
entire music category all the time. Same as for TV and film. So I've got the entire a la carte system. So I don't think you can compete with that. It'll just become very, very streamlined and specific.
As an extension of the TV question, and I'm aware that obviously, given the fact that you have, or maybe still have, a partnership with a cinema, But are you still partnered with the cinema now?
Yeah.
Okay.
They've got an exclusivity to the end.
So I don't know whether you can answer this question or not, but I'm curious as to what you think about the future of cinema, because I really love going to the cinema. I don't go anywhere near as often as I'd like to, but for me it really is like, it takes me back to being a kid when I would get like, it would be kind of frosty outside and I would go with my parents and I'd get like, you know, my popcorn, and it was like a big screen, and it's like, it's a real, I think it's a great date as well. You know, people shit on cinema dates.
Yeah.
I actually think it's great because then you can talk about it afterwards and all the stuff.
Yeah.
So I love cinemas, but I'm aware of the fact that I think the numbers of people going to cinemas are going down.
Well,
I don't know what you think about that.
Yes and no. So I remember in the noughties, everyone was like, well, they've been saying it for a long time, but I remember in the noughties specifically, it was like, cinema's dying, there's no good films anymore, and the cinemas basically all going to start closing. And since that, I remember 2008 is when Iron Man 1 came out, which was the start of the MCU.
Such a good film.
Great film. So since that time, we've had, in the top 10 highest grossing films of all time, I think almost all of them have come out, apart from Titanic, in that time. So you could look at that metric and be like, we've had the highest grossing films of all time come out in the last, however you want to call it, like 15, 20 years. Clearly the market is healthy. Cinema, don't quote me on this, but like the revenue for cinema is actually going up. The problem is that it's, like I was saying with TV and radio, it's become incredibly consolidated. So what you've seen is the rise of the superhero genre become really prominent. And what that essentially is yes, there's a market of marketing to essentially 14-year-old boys who love going to the cinema to see like things fight. There's that, but it's more about creating experiences to entice you out of your living room.
Exactly,
So
that's also what I think it is. I think
the sort of, if you think about Christopher Nolan at the top of his game of big budget summer blockbuster, Denis Villeneuve, these large like, oh, but you've got to see it in IMAX. You're missing out if you don't. You've got to see it on the big screen experience. So what you're seeing is the death of the rom-com, the death of the comedy, which is sad, because why do you need to go into a room to watch that when you get essentially the same cinematic experience in your living room? I don't think that's true, but a lot of people think that. Instead, it's like you have to go see Dune on the big screen.
Yeah.
You have to go see Oppenheimer. It was shot on 70mm IMAX film. Come pay £25 for the ticket, get you in. So it's just going to change and lean more into justifying the big screen experience, premium viewing. So you've got IMAX, which is huge, and then you've got the sort of bougie leather sofa, every cousin. Like, come and if you don't want to leave your home, that's right, I'll make it more comfortable than your home, and I'll sell you an £11 glass of Malbec and a pizza. It's like, yes, you can come. This is IMAX is like the other way. It's like it was shot on IMAX film. It's like not, IMAX isn't just a bigger screen, it's an effect created.
It's
on
an experience.
Shot on a larger piece of celluloid when projected on a large screen creates a more immersive effect. So you'll just see more consolidation of bigger entertainment.
I can see that because I feel like I'm no less inclined to go to the cinema now than I was 10 years ago. To me, it's still a really cool experience. Like, I'm going to see Napoleon in a week or so. I'm really excited to go and see it with my mate because it's a night out. It's a really cool night out.
Are you seeing it at the IMAX?
No, we're seeing it at the Everyman.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, okay, fine. It's an expensive night out, definitely. But I'd rather do that than go to a bar.
Weirdly, I noticed
kind of
pre-COVID, standard multiplex tickets were expensive. Do you remember they got to like 15, 18
Yeah.
pounds? I'm not talking about like premium viewing. I mean, like the standard multiplex was expensive. COVID happened, everything was shut. The death of cinema again, right? And then coming out of COVID, the tickets got really cheap. I don't know if you've noticed this at most cinemas now. You can go to like top multiplexes and the tickets are like $6.99 if you book online.
Are they?
Which
Okay.
is really,
I don't go to cinema often enough to actually know
it's
that.
really, really good. It's like £5-6. I'm like, oh, you've literally slashed it by like 70% from pre-COVID. So I think their new model is cinema chains never really made money on cinema tickets anyway. The whole model is to get you in to hopefully buy you sell you popcorn. So if they could just get more of you to come in, then you're going to buy popcorn, which is like the highest GP product of all time.
It's so true. I saw
Yeah.
me and my girl saw the Love Actually re-release last week.
Oh, nice.
And it was like £7 each a ticket. And I remember thinking like, this is View as well. I was like, this is sick.
It's really cheap, and it's like a really good deal to just
Yeah.
put on a film and go catch something versus like 16 quid if you're buying for a family of 4.
Yeah,
quite a lot.
but then I got there and I was like, well, I need to get popcorn. And,
Yeah.
if I'm getting popcorn,
that's
I
true.
also need to get the Tango double ice blast, like the blue and the red. I have to get
Naughty,
it.
yeah.
And,
Do you feel like
I spent like 40 quid.
I think
I
it
paid
adds
for
up.
it.
Yeah, adds
Yeah.
up, definitely.
Popcorn and Coke out of the tap at a pub
Yeah.
enjoys the highest economies of scale of any
Wouldn't
product.
surprise me at all.
'Cause
I
Coke
like-
is like, it's like in that dehydrated syrup that then gets rehydrated.
Yeah.
So I think like when I worked at a pub, my manager was like, you can have as much tap Coke as you want.
Go
because-
crazy.
So I think like if you someone orders like the highest gross drink at a bar is like a vodka and Coke.
Yeah.
Because the vodka they lose money on, beer they basically lose money on. But
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
add Coke to it, it's like, wait,
It shoots right up.
wow,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
give you as much as you want.
Do you feel like there's a part of you that thinks once you've experienced the more luxury cinemas that you can't go back to the views and the Odeons of the world?
Well, how old are you and like how much money have you got?
Well, yeah, that is true. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, I think it depends on the film. Like sometimes I'll go to like a nice.
But do you
little
go for the
boutique
film
thing.
or do you go for the experience?
So when a film has been shot on IMAX and it like justifies the larger screen ticket and you're literally seeing more screen real estate, I'll go and see it in IMAX because you're seeing a different experience to seeing it on the small screen.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but it's like it's not just if you put this podcast up or a phone you shot on your video on an IMAX screen that doesn't make it IMAX. It's shot on a larger piece of celluloid and you're seeing a bigger effect on a big screen. So I'll do that for the big films because it's worth it and I see the difference. But then I'm totally happy to go and see like a much more quiet sort of different kind of film at like a more or just like a multiplex because I don't want to spend like 50 quid a
Yeah,
week.
it's a lot.
I'm quite happy to just like pop over for $6.99 and catch a film.
What's something that, as a film expert, which is what you are, yeah, you are. No, you are though. As a film expert, what's something that you wish a film layman like myself knew about film or would appreciate about film, or should maybe consider about film or be aware of?
First of all, I'm not an expert. I just talk about it 2 hours a week every week.
I think that's 10,000 hours. I think that makes you an expert.
If
If you go to the cinema 3 times a week and then do a show about it 2 hours a week, you are an expert, my friend.
it's probably like I think more people should try and see stuff that they think is out of their comfort zone because it probably isn't. There's loads of things that I think, I think most of the films are marketed to 14-year-old boys. It's comic books, it's Transformers, and unfortunately, like a lot of people feel really isolated from the cinema market, and they're like, there are no good films anymore. And I'm kind of like, they're just like not marketed to you. It's the same thing that people say about video games. They'd be like, oh, games are so trashy, they're violent, and all they see is COD, Fortnite, and FIFA because that's what gets marketed at the Super Bowl. There's nothing wrong with those games, but there are so many amazing video games that come out that are doing something like so amazing that I think a mass audience would enjoy, but they're just not like seeking it out. And I think the same is kind of happening with film. You can look at it and be like, I don't want to see Iron Man 6 and I don't want to see Transformers 7, where are like the really interesting ideas in film. And I do think it's struggling to get those type of films made because there's no DVD market anymore. But I would just say like really try and seek out things that you've heard are good that you wouldn't typically go for, and that really like broadens your horizon. It makes you all of a sudden be like, oh, that was so good. If that's good, then this other thing, and you start getting onto loads of really interesting films. But yeah, I think someone asked Matt Damon about Good Will Hunting, and he was like, you can never get that film made today because back in the day you had 2 goes to make money with your film. You could release it in cinema, and then you had this ever expansive DVD market where people could just continuously buy your DVD forever.
Yeah.
And now that's gone. You basically have one chance to make it, and it's at the cinema. If you don't make your money, you're fucked. So so studios become incredibly risk averse and consolidated, and they're not going to give money to a rom-com or like a cute little indie film if it's not going to make money.
Do you think we're going to see more of a democratization between YouTube and platforms like Netflix and Max and Prime?
Yeah, I think Netflix is doing very well with this model of let's commission a bit of everything for everyone and pray that some of it sticks. So I think what Netflix currently has going really well for it is that when something hits on Netflix, it's like anyone talks about.
Their share price literally went up as a result of Dharma.
Yeah, like when there's
A result of what?
Dharma.
Dharma,
The Jeffrey
Bridgerton.
Dahmer story.
Oh, Dharma. Yeah. Dharma. Yeah.
Netflix docs do really well. Like when there's a hot Netflix documentary, it's like all everyone talks about for 2 weeks, and you're like, how does this effect of like it goes on the Netflix homepage, you're like, this effect of everyone talking about something, I think it's right now only unique to Netflix. But at the same time, there is so much shovelware that I see on that platform that like maybe my mum's mate is like watching this show, but other than that, you're like, you commission this, but like not so many other interesting things, and the quality I think really varies. And so there's some stuff on Netflix which is like super high caliber, and you're like really into it, and other stuff you're like, wait, what?
How?
But
How does that happen?
But what do you think it is about Netflix that has... I've thought about this a lot recently, but it's like Netflix has a different feeling to me than Prime or Apple TV or HBO Max.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it has a glowing feeling.
Cozy.
Yes, it's a cozy feeling, and I
Yeah.
don't know if that's because it's been around the longest in this space, or if it's so kind of synonymous with modern youth culture, you know, like Netflix and chill, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's so part of our modern culture. I don't know if that's why, but it does feel different.
Yeah, I think straight away the UI of Netflix is way better. I think Prime's UI is
It's terrible.
Yeah, I
dog
agree.
shit. It needs to decide what kind of thing it is. Problem with Prime and Apple's similar. Apple I think is decent, but the Prime UI is also trying to sell you all the content a la carte. So I don't know if I'm going on Prime to watch a Prime original show or to like find just like a film I want to rent for $3.99. So it's got those two clashing things. I would say maybe you just separate it. You make Prime Video its own format where I'm on the app, everything I can see I can watch for free. Like Netflix never asks you for any money.
Yeah, that's the other thing. That's a huge. I've never thought about that. That's
So
so
your
true.
relationship with that browsing format really changes when you're like,
It's
can
a
I
good
watch
point, yeah.
this?
Every time you click, and you finally, and you're scrolling for ages, being like, okay, trying to agree on something with whoever you're watching with, and then you go, okay, what about that? And you go, oh, it's not included.
And also like this might be my TV or like, but to be honest, I use it on like my PlayStation as well. Like the actual UI runs slowly on Prime.
Yeah.
Whereas Netflix, it's clicky, it's
instant.
fast.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're lagging behind my click, I'm
It's hyper responsive.
I'm off. I'm done. I think Apple TV is doing a really interesting thing right now. They've got a couple of really great shows that have done well. They're clearly going for that HBO style model of really fewer, very high caliber shows. I don't think Apple has had the same Netflix style effect where like when a show on Apple is really good, I don't think everyone is going to watch it. Whereas when Netflix shows really hit, it gets seen. So sometimes people are like, what's good on Apple? And I'll mention like 2 things and they're like, I've never heard of it.
Why do you think that is?
Really good. I just think they're still figuring it out. I think they need like a Game of Thrones caliber of show to hit for people to be like, Apple TV is really worth it. But Apple TV are throwing money around.
Really?
But not even
They've got all the talent.
Yeah.
And Apple are like the richest cash entity.
It's good you say that actually, because I can't think of an Apple TV show that's been made that I would have heard about.
Severance. Have you watched Severance?
No.
That's brilliant. You should see that. That's
I've heard about
Adam Scott.
Ted Lasso and The Morning Show.
Ted Lasso.
I've started watching Ted Lasso last week actually.
Nice, yes. Ted Lasso in America, they adore Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Right.
There's like, you go to America, there's like the calendars, the mugs, the bobbleheads.
Really?
Whereas I think in the UK we like it, but you have to sort of remember that's not what the UK is really like.
That's not us.
For us, we're like, that's cute. They
exactly.
Whereas in America, like the UK soccer.
It's
oh my
British.
God. What if they were more like Americans? Wouldn't it be fab? Whereas in the UK, we're like, this is sweet, and I'm very depressed, and the show's very happy. So I'll indulge, and it was locked down when it came out, so it's like a really sort of nice balance.
But what you said about how you think it comes down to they haven't had like their Game of Thrones type show, but what do you think it is about that thing that you said, how on Netflix, if there's a show that is really good of that caliber, everyone's like, you need to watch it, and that's not happening with Apple, even if, as you said, there are some really high caliber shows on there? Why do you think that is?
More people have Netflix. I think the Netflix is the verb, like to hoover. So if you're gonna, why don't we just watch something on Netflix tonight? You could mean like all the apps. To Netflix something, I think, has become the verb, which is what you want to be when you're a brand,
That's a very good point.
streamer.
Yeah.
We talk about
So
streamers,
true,
we mention Netflix, we don't say Apple really. But that'll come. They were also first. They also had like the first round of shows that were a real hit, like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. That was when people were like, oh, TV. It's the golden age of TV. The stars are there. The budget's going to TV. They were the head of that, and they've been doing it for a long time. Which I think really helps them.
Just going back to something completely separate, I'm curious to know from your perspective, what do you think has allowed people to actually engage with you and George, and what's allowed your podcast to get to where it is now? Completely separate point, but I'm just curious as to like what's allowed you to get to where you are when so many others have not.
I think people have told us that they feel like we talk about film in an approachable, non-pretentious way. So we've always wanted to capture that spirit of like, you've just gone to see a film and you've gone to the pub with your like 2 or 3 mates to chat about it. And I think we try not to, I don't know, you want to make sure that people can understand what you're saying when you're talking about it. So we don't take for granted that people know exactly who the director is, who the cast member is, what films they did before. So we're always trying to get people included in that process of like, this person, they did this before. And we don't, whenever like your opinion that's different to us is wrong. We've always kind of been open to be like, if you like, I'd love to know if you liked it, send us an email why. And I think that being yourself and not trying to be something that you're not is always quite helpful. And then like, if you can be funny and entertaining, that's always always great. But,
Awesome.
I would say like, I've solved it.
I'm actually just the guy.
I don't want to like be like, yes, I completed podcasting.
But you have built a successful podcast though.
Yeah, I have an audience which is like as happy as I can
You're at
be.
the start of your journey, of course, but you have still got past a lot that most people have not.
Yeah, like I go back to before. I just think it's consistently doing a thing. I don't think there's anything that special about what me and George do. I just think we've done it for 2 years and haven't stopped. And I would just urge people who are like trying to figure out how to do a podcast, stop thinking about episode 1. Just think about how you can do a thing consistently for as long a time as you can, and I promise you, like, you will get an audience eventually.
No, it's a really good piece of advice.
You will care the most about your own show, and you will naturally pivot and move slowly better and better. And it will, like, I will never ever go back to my first 10 episodes because I just cringe-inducing, which I think is a good thing because it means I'm growing.
Yeah, it's true.
It means we're getting
100%.
better.
It's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Just before we wrap up, I have 2 questions I want to ask.
Yeah.
Very, very basic, but I think you've got quite an interesting view on things, and so I'm really curious to ask.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. What is the best film you've ever seen and why? And subsequently, what is the worst film you've ever seen and why?
Ooh, okay, so I don't have a favorite.
You
film.
immediately went so film critic. You went. Ooh.
Depends what mood I'm in.
Yeah.
But 2 that I will often go for. I love The Prestige. I think that film, I could watch it once a year, every year of my life, and I'll notice something different about it. And it's layered, and it's deep, and it's smart, and the acting's brilliant. Have you guys seen The Prestige?
A great film.
Don't Google anything about it. Just go and watch it.
Yeah.
And it's a film that has to be seen twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your first experience watching it is one very interesting thing, and then your second experience watching it is something very different. And then my more like film bro answer is the Lord of the Rings extended edition. That is my, whenever I'm sick, I'll settle in for like 13 hours of the Lord of the Rings. I don't think there's anything else like it, and I don't feel like anything like that could get made. It nearly like busted New Line Cinema when they made it. It's just pure cinema at its absolute best. It looks beautiful. Nothing about it has aged. It's just perfect, and it makes me happy every single time I watch it. So that's my more like lame answer. Or like Empire Strikes Back.
Right. Yeah. Of course, the classic.
I watched Mulholland Drive for the first time this year. I don't know if you guys know about that film.
That's been on my list for a
David
decade.
Lynch. It's like really one that loads of film critics like really revere it, and it's like it's this film that really eludes people who watch it, and it's like an endless puzzle that you're constantly solving in your mind. And I always know if I like a film, if when I've seen it, I'm thinking about it for days and days afterwards. And I saw Mulholland Drive for the first time, and I've like really tried to understand what it's about. And since I've seen it, like I don't know, 6 months ago, it's always on my mind, and it like pops up and it lives in my head rent free.
Yeah.
And I totally understand why people who film critics who study the film are like, I never really understand it. Every time you watch it, there's something different you notice. It's got this really like stickiness to it. And I feel like that. So it's something like latches hold of you like that. Like,
that's the confirmation I needed to watch it. It's been on my list for so many years.
But
Barney said to me the other day, he was like, he asked me, what's the film you asked me about the other day? Where you were like, have you seen this? And then I said no, and he said, your gaps in film knowledge is really weird. Like there's really weird films that I've seen, but then there's really weirdly big specific ones I just haven't caught. I can't remember what the thing was. Worst film and why?
The worst film. I just saw the new Hunger Games film and I thought it was absolute dog shit.
God, but you just know going into that it's going to be absolute trash.
Like, I know the second, like the Hunger Games film 3 and 4 were not good, and I don't feel like the Hunger Games sustains itself outside of like the Hunger Games format, and when it leaves the games, I feel like it falls apart. This isn't my least favorite film. It's just like one I saw recently that I like really went into.
But it's like the 3rd or 4th of anything good.
Yeah, well.
Because like you compare Shrek 3 to example, to Shrek 1, and it's
I think Shrek 5 is happening.
Is it actually?
Yeah,
really?
that
is genuinely a shame. That is
just milking that cash cow, baby.
I was just like this dialogue, and I've not read a page of the books, but like I shouldn't necessarily have to if I'm watching the films. The dialogue was fucking atrocious. And I watched this and it's 2 hours and 45 minutes long. Who lets a film that's got that terrible dialogue lets it go on for that long? I know some people in the room editing that were like, this isn't a great film, maybe we just like cut the fuck out of it. And I was so bored, and I just watched this. Me and my girlfriend went to see it, and we realized 10 minutes in, oh my god, this is a really bad movie. And I remember getting 45 minutes into the film swearing I was like an hour and a half in. I was like, oh my god, I have 2 hours left of this film.
Did you not contemplate getting up and leaving?
No, because it kind of like nullifies my impression of it on the podcast.
If
I leave after 40 minutes, I can't be like, this was rubbish.
True, yeah.
You kind of have to see it through. But I don't know, like bad films, it's sometimes, I don't want to just be that guy that's like, this film is bad and this film is bad. But it's sometimes things that like, you can watch a bad film and be like, that film's rubbish. But when a film wastes your time or just makes a really irritating decision about its plot, it's sometimes not technically the worst film, but something that really irritates you. that can be really annoying.
And lastly, there's two films I want to get your opinion on specifically that are very close to my heart,
Yeah.
and I've heard mixed opinions on both of them,
Yeah.
but they're two of my favorite films.
Okay.
Hackers.
Hackers. I've not seen Hackers.
Okay, great. It's Angelina Jolie and Johnny Lee Miller.
Oh yes, I do know.
Yeah.
I do know this film, and they dated after that film.
I think they did.
I
Yeah,
think they
They
did.
did.
Well done, Johnny.
So thoughts, feelings, opinions, or can you not remember it? Or too long
No,
ago?
I've not seen it, but I know of the film. Yeah.
Okay.
So is it really good? Do you love it?
I love it because when it was that golden like point of computers were still quite new. They've got kind of like
The hacking.
And it's like
fast type.
hacking was fast typing and lots of green lines of command prompt, on the screen.
Post Matrix hacking thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was that perfect. And then there's also a lot of like, I think it's really worth watching because aesthetically and culturally, it had this really particular feel to it. There's a lot of like cyberpunk. There's a lot of rollerblading and like eccentric clothing in that kind of cyberpunkish hacking tech is cool kind of era. I really, really like it.
I love the way the 90s and the noughties portray futuristic tech because
Yes.
they're just on the verge of like this technology and they kind of can see what it is with an interweb of connected devices. Like they kind of know what it is, but they have no idea what it is. And so like all the tech is like, let me just hack into the mainframe and blah, 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 blah. So it's always really fun to see it. The Matrix, funnily enough, of all of them, ages really well, and all the fast typing makes sense in their world, but they very much like set the tone for all of it. But yeah, like fast hacking is great.
So yeah, I would love at some point maybe if you could slap a little word on the podcast
Yeah,
about what you
yeah,
think of
that's
Hackers.
right.
I would
Yeah,
love
I
to
would
hear.
love that.
I would love to hear like actual like experts break down that film. It's one of my
I'd love
favorites. And finally, my favorite film of all time is Casino Royale.
Oh, great choice.
Okay.
Casino Royale is brilliant.
Okay,
it's
great,
so
great.
brilliant. I had this relationship with Casino Royale where I saw it in cinema when it came out like 2006 and like thought it was great, and then rediscovered it like a year later or so, like watching it on TV at home, and I remember just being like, holy shit, this film is
epic.
so well done.
Yeah.
And it was such a reaction to, you have to remember that the film before that was Die Another Day with Pierce Brosnan, which was such a different tone.
Yeah.
Crazy CG, crazy gadgets, crazy cars, and then The Bourne Ultimatum had come out I think a year or so after Die Another Day, and basically changed action forever. Bourne Ultimatum was not fancy, not slick, shaky camera.
Yeah, the shaky camera, the fast cuts of the action scene changed how they shot action
and it
scenes.
made Die Another Day just look like an absolute hamfest. And that Casino Royale is such a response to the Bourne Ultimatum. And in the first scene of Casino Royale, that whole really violent black and white moment where he drowns the guy in the urinal, and it's just really graphic and shaky, and you're like, God damn, this is like a really different approach, modern Bond. And it's just such good fun. Really good at explaining the rules of poker, even though you don't know the dynamics of a poker game without having to explain the rules.
That's true as well.
I always think it's really hard to do that in a cinematographic way.
What did you think about the subsequent films that came after?
He sort of had a one-on-one off. Quantum of Solace unfortunately suffered with the writer strikes that happened at the time. We're going to unfortunately probably get a bunch of really crap content in the next year because of that. You remember like all the shows that got crap, like Lost and Heroes and all of that. So that unfortunately they were filming without a script. So that film suffered. I loved Skyfall. I think that might be my favourite of Craig's era. It was so smart. I think Sam Mendes did such a great job, like recalibrating that character and really like questioning like why do you need a man behind the gun? What even is James Bond? Putting some emotion behind Daniel Craig's Bond with M that I think the series really needed. What was the next one? Spectre. Yeah, like trying to sort of like off the. I don't know if Sam Mendes was still like into the idea of doing a Bond, but it was like Skyfall did so well. Can you just do the same thing again, please? But I don't think you can capture like the lightning in a bottle that well. So that was okay. Like couple of good scenes in Spectre, a little bit ridiculous. A lot of just like nonsensical moments, but it was gorgeous to look at. Spectre is such a good looking film. It looks like a perfume ad.
It does.
That's a very good way of putting it.
I don't know if it's like a good thing, and like Tom Ford styled the whole thing, so obviously like it looks amazing.
That's such a good summary.
It's good, but you watch it you're like, this is nonsense.
Right. No Time to Die.
No Time to Die. I liked. I don't think it will be. I don't think about it a lot. So I think it will come and it will be a little bit forgotten. It'll be great pub trivia in 20 years. I don't think it's a bad film. I just think it was also interesting that they start with Casino Royale, which is like super grounded, still opulent, but like grounded in reality, no fancy gadgets. And then you get to No Time to Die, and there was like nuclear weapons, nanobots, and like a crazy virus if you breathe it, you just like evaporate. So they like kind of had to go a little bit supernatural, which I guess was fun.
Yeah, true.
But I want them to reinvent it again with the new Bond. Get Apparently the rumors are like Nolan wants to do like a period 1950s 60s Bond.
Wow.
Who do you want Bond to be?
I don't really mind. I really don't mind. I'd love to go for an unknown. A lot of the actors they put forward for all of these, like the 10 actors who could play Bond, I'm like, yeah, I like it. Daniel Craig was very unknown when they cast him and they made a star of him.
Yeah.
Find me someone I don't have a pre-existing impression of and make them Bond. I really don't care.
Which to an extent is what they like to do.
It is.
Yeah, it just means you've got a clean slate. Like I feel like Idris Elba, would have been cool 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But like ever since he's been in the running, I'm like, yeah, just kind of be the same thing. I love Idris Elba, but is it really that interesting to cast Idris Elba?
I always used to think Tom Hardy would be really cool.
Yeah, again, I think
Hardy
maybe 10 years ago, like when
but I know what
he
you
did
mean.
Inception in 2010, I was like, that would be cool.
I could never get on board with that. And I love Tom Hardy, but for some reason, anytime everyone was like, I can see him as Bond, I can't see it.
They're saying Aaron Taylor-Johnson is very heavily rumoured, which I think he'd be really good. He was in, I think his Bond audition was Bullet Train, if you saw that, with Brad Pitt.
Okay.
What do you mean that was his Bond audition?
Oh, people have Bond auditions, so like...
Wait, we got to talk about this. Wait,
it's
what?
It's not an official audition. People will say that was their Bond audition.
Right.
So Layer Cake was Daniel Craig's Bond audition.
Night Manager was Tom Hiddleston's, right?
Yeah, so like all of typically your potential Bond is being seen in a suit doing some suave talking action, and people start to get the fever.
Okay,
and that's usually like links in. So like Regé Jean Page's Bond audition would be Bridgerton, and all the car ads where he's like driving in slow motion.
Yeah.
What is the future? The new Audi Technic, blah blah blah.
Right. Fascinating. Bond audition.
Yeah, I think they've done like the gritty modern reboot.
Yeah.
Go period, take it out. And I think Craig's era was all about what does it mean to have a Bond in the 21st century when you've got drones and spy planes. Like, why do you need a man behind the gun? Great question to answer. Did it with Craig. Go back to the 1950s and 60s, adapt the original books. That's what I think Nolan wants to do, but I don't know if
So wait, is Nolan signed on to direct Bond?
He's not signed on. There are like very heavy rumours to suggest Nolan's going to do it.
Yeah.
But the whole like Barbara Broccoli Ian Fleming Foundation want creative control, and I think if Nolan wants to do it, I just read this in an article by the way. Right. I think if Nolan wants to do it, he wants to have complete creative control, which I totally understand. So I don't think he wants to be told how to write and who to cast. I think he's like, if you want to hire me, I'll do like my Dark Knight trilogy. I want to do my Batman. I want to do my Bond. So that would be cool.
Yeah,
dude, this has been one of my favorite episodes.
It has. Also, I knew it was going to be fun. I knew it was.
But I knew it was going to be fun because I'm like, oh yeah, it's James, and we used to know each other and stuff. But this was surpassed all my expectations.
Oh mate,
I think you're clearly such an expert in film, and I think you have, which I guess partly shows of you being a podcaster. I think you have a really you're very eloquent, and I think you have a really interesting way of describing things and putting words together. Like even something as subtle as like saying Spectre's like a perfume ad. As soon as you said that, I thought of the kind of when they're in I think it's Rome, when they have the Spectre meeting, whatever it is. I think it's Rome. I thought of the kind of yellow hue of like the color grading of the buildings and stuff, and I went, "That's so true." The dark suits with the yellowish, orangey color.
That can be a good and bad thing. Sometimes you don't want it to look like a perfume ad.
But the point is that the way that you described that, I thought was so spot on. So yeah, dude, I'm so happy for all the success of the podcast. It's going really well. And genuinely, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find you? That's your camera right there.
Oh, thanks so much. You can find my podcast is Pulp Kitchen at Pulp Kitchen Podcast. We're on basically every single platform. You can follow me at James Briefel on Instagram. You can follow my mate George at George Pundek. We post a weekly film show every single Wednesday. And yeah, it's really great. We talk about new stuff, old stuff, play loads of fun pub games. Our social media is all just like crazy games and clips from our show. So if you fancy that, please go and have a listen.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah. Such a cool episode. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Dude,
real pleasure, man.
Let's do another one.
Yes, 100%. Guys, you heard it. Amazing episode. Please like the video. Leave a comment on anything that you thought. We will be in the comments. Other than that, we'll see you in the next one. Take care.